Hello, my name is Vince Brown. I'm with Isett Heritage Museum in Huntington, Pennsylvania. And we have been described as the Common Man's Museum. We are standing in the washer section of the museum at this point. And what you can see on the wall are the washboards. And those are very early, of course, but they transitioned then to the first mechanical washer that was supposed to save women from drudgery, but that's questionable. The next step from beyond this is then the rocker washer, which simply does exactly the same thing except in a different direction. And from there, we then go to electrified washers, and the Cadillac of which is this Maytag. And the nice feature about the Maytag was that it was a convertible model. The wringer section could be removed and things such as meat grinders placed on top to do other tasks. From there, we then go to washers with which you're probably more familiar. What you see here are the electronics from the original Huntington Cable Company. That company was started by Mr. Isett in the 1970s, 80s, and whenever they transitioned to digital equipment, this came to the museum. Each one of the small boxes that you see here was required for every channel that you had on your TV set. All of this you see behind me was replaced by a small box for simply digital equipment. And then we move to film. This projector came out of the Shapiro Theater in downtown Huntington when they went to digital, and we were the recipient of not only the projector, but the large pancakes that you see here that replaced the old reels on these projectors. What you're seeing here is Huntington Cable Company's internal studio. They were capable of projecting slides, showing 2 movies that fed into this box in the center, and then the video feed from the back picked all of that up, and that was what was sent to your home TV set. In our farm implement section, we have everything from incubators from the early 1900s to potato plows, cut-off saws for cutting firewood, reversing plows to plow along hillsides, an ice cart from the Huntington Railroad, the old PRR Railroad, and this was restored by a local gentleman, another potato plow, and a sled with all of the milk cans in that we used to bring them from the farm out to the main road. What you're looking at here is wooden water pipe that was used in some of the local towns. This is a white pine log, and the water would not rot this until air hit it. As long as you kept it underground and wet, it would not rot. The drill that you see at the bottom is used to start the holes on these logs. The second log is a gas pipe log, and this is a coupler for the various sections of the pipe. And on the bottom is a pump for the water as it would come through the logs. We're in building number 2 at this point in our camera section, and these are mainly large format cameras that were before 1950, except this one, when I'll explain that in just a moment. This camera is from about 1916 and was used for large plates, glass plates, and it was used basically as a portrait camera. This camera is from the 1970s, and it's a Chinese replica of some of the early 20th century cameras from the US. This camera is a Grover and was made in Chicago about 1950, 1960, and was a portrait camera. The large one on the end is known as a banquet camera and was used just for that, to take large photographs of banquets of several hundred people at a time, and it gave you a 12 by 20 inch negative. The camera that you see here is known as a wet plate camera. It's from the 1870s, and it was called wet plate simply because the negative that went in had to be wet before it would take a photograph. Associated with this are lenses of varying ages, everything from modern material to the one lens, the Holmes, Booth and Haydn's lens from 1859, which was just prior to the Civil War. In this case, we have our miniature cameras, and the most popular of which was the HIT camera. This was popular with the American servicemen at the end of World War II in Japan. The servicemen would take photographs, and the Japanese would process them for them, and then the servicemen would send the photographs home. Also in this case, we have some aerial cameras for sky photographs, fingerprint cameras, cameras to use on a microscope, and a still camera that would also take movies. Instant cameras were quite popular during the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and the very first instant camera was the Polaroid that you see on the end, the Model 95. That was the very first. And as you go down the line, you can see they became smaller and smaller. On the top, the very first Kodak instant camera was the EK4, and you can see that they virtually remained the same size the entire time. This is a movie projector from the 1930s. It was a commercial model and came from the Clifton Theater in downtown Huntington. It has a large light section in the back to produce the light, a projection section, and a sound section. This is another movie projector, and this one came from the Reality Theater in Robertsdale, which is south of Huntington. It also has a light section, a projection section, and a sound section, and it uses the large film reels. You can compare this to a more modern 1970s video camera that uses small tape cassettes. We're in the gun section at this point, and we have a very wide range of guns, everything from the 1600s to modern guns. One of the first sets is this commemorative section of Winchesters that were produced during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We have an extremely rare Winchester, 1873, with a 36-inch barrel. There were very few of these made. Also in the gun section are a number of handguns. We have Derringers, pepper boxes, modern firearms from double-barrel shotguns to semi-automatic shotguns, and a complete selection of air rifles. I'm standing in a replica of an 1800s gun shop by an actual gunsmith named Abraham McGacken, and he worked in a little town called Markelsburg, just south of Huntington. In his shop, we have a lathe, a metal lathe. We have his workbench, an anvil, a hand drill press, and a swage. In 2004, St. James Lutheran Church burned to the ground. Only the altarpiece, the reredos, and 4 stained glass windows were saved. We got one of the windows for the museum. The reredos just fit. We have a 1/2 inch clearance at the top. The pews came from a different church. We don't know which one. The chandeliers were from a local synagogue, and the organs that you see were all donated. Now we're located in the tool section of Building 3. And as you can see, we have a rather extensive tool collection. On my right is an ice saw that was used to cut large blocks of ice out of ponds to be used in the old refrigeration systems of the late 1800s, early 1900s. And as we go down the tool section, we have a farrier's chest for shoeing horses, various tool chests for saws and drills, beam drilling jigs, planes, bow saws, and a carpenter's chest. We're in a tin shop section of the museum at this point, and because of all the farming that was done in the area, tin shops were a very common thing. And what you see here is a combination of two tin shops that were local. And some of the products from these tin shops you can see on the back wall, everything from sieves to chimney pieces to cake trays were made in the tin shops. This is our radio section of the museum, and we have everything from the very early tube radios, large tubes that you can see here, and tuning you needed to set each dial before you could actually bring a station in to hear it. But these radios came without speakers, so you normally had to use a headset in order to hear anything. Then we transitioned from these large tube, large radios to the smaller radios, still with tubes. This was all during the 40s, 50s, 60s. And from there we then go to this little 7 transistor set that made everything easier. Along with our radio area, we also have a section for TV sets. This set is from the late 40s, early 50s, and that's a home unit. This is one of the first portable TV sets. We transitioned from this early portable to a much later portable set, and then finally our current TV sets.